Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is What the Health. And this one is going to be a little bit more on the fun side and less on the disturbing side. And my guest and colleague is Rodgers PhD. He is the founder of Parkinsons Recovery in 2004. Previously, he was a professor for 20 years on the faculties of University of Texas at Austin and at Martin School of Public Policy at the University of Kentucky. Former Navy officer, county administrator, and assistant secretary of state in Texas, Robert now focuses on identifying natural therapies that offer relief from the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Well, thank you, Greg. I greatly appreciate the invitation.
Indeed. So we do have a fun topic today. We're talking about the future of medicine. And you know, it is before we got on the show, I said, yes, that's a great topic. And you agreed. And I want to ask you what inspired you to choose this topic today?
I think it's because I have had interviews with so many individuals, over 1,000, who currently experience Parkinson's symptoms, who report that they're taking positive action to get relief from those symptoms. For example, people will be doing detoxing and detoxing protocol with some outstanding medical professionals. So they work on it for 6 months. They work on it for a year. And their doctor tells them, well, we've got about 25% of the mercury out, but there's still 75% there. And so the persons who I talk with get really flustered because they're really focusing on some approaches that they know should be able to yield positive results. And yet they're not finding that they're feeling a whole lot better. So I chose detoxing as an example. Of course, there are lots of other protocols that people are pursuing, given they might have some infections, bacterial issues, you name it. And so I began to step back and think, okay, people are taking the actions that they need to take. They're taking responsibility. They are getting a little better. That's the good news. Yeah. And yet, if you step back and say, okay, well, are they to the point where they can fully recover their life force? Well, many people, the answer is they're better, but they're not fully recovered. Some people are. Some people are back and they're good to go. But why aren't more people able to actually find full and complete relief from their symptoms? So after almost 2 decades now of looking at the many different kind of approaches people can use, and many of them are excellent, they're successful for people, they work, they help, I began to think, okay, wait a minute. Maybe we've got to think about this in an entirely different way. Maybe there's a different approach to medicine rather than thinking about applying some supplements or thinking about prescription medicines or surgeries. Maybe there's a different way to be able to think, well, what can we do to help the body return back to a balance and recovery?
Interesting. Yeah. So, and you're seeing this as the future of medicine, which I am full on and board, especially with some of the outline of where we're going in our discussion today. It's some of my favorite topics to talk about. And I want to start out with the kind of the healing of function of frequencies and what are you seeing with that? I mean, you are taking inventory of 1,000 patients or plus of folks with Parkinson's disease, and you've got healing a function of frequencies here. So what are you seeing? And I think that's in your book as well.
What we're discovering is that there are many factors that influence, for example, the production of dopamine. That's one of the factors that influence the symptoms. So there's a whole process called HEM, H-E-M-E. There are 8 steps to HEM. If there is any degradation in any of those 8 steps, the person is not going to be able to have the oxygen that is sent to the cells. They're not going to be able to convert the iron that they have that will produce the L-DOPA that again will lead to dopamine. So what I realized is everything in the body has a frequency, everything. So it doesn't matter what you look at. We are composed of millions of frequencies. So if you're looking at the complex processes of the body, it all of a sudden occurred to me, all right, so what you need to do is you need to absorb the frequencies that the body needs that happen to be missing. So if we think, for example, vitamin C, everybody knows that's a great antioxidant. Well, vitamin C vibrates at a frequency. So we can receive vitamin C through frequencies, or we can take a medicine. All right, so some of the kinds of ways that we can get well by taking supplements and medicines will address those frequencies. However, there are many frequencies that we need to receive that we really are not getting through those kind of mechanisms. So it suddenly occurred to me, well, wait a minute, all medicine really involves an assessment of the frequencies that are missing in our body. That's why we have symptoms. And then what's going to happen is once we realize what frequencies are missing, then all we need to do is to allow the body to receive the frequencies that it needs in order to be able to come back into balance. So it's all about frequencies. And, we're not really talking about anything that's foreign to anybody. I mean, everybody now has these smartphones. Okay. Well, hello. How does this work? Hello. I mean, I'm holding this phone. There's no wire here. I mean, hello. Well, it's all about frequencies. So I don't think, Greg, that you and I are talking about any frou-frou stuff here. This really is at the cutting edge of where technology is at. It really is all about recognizing that frequencies are not just about allowing us to talk on the phone. They are going to enable us to be able to heal the imbalances that exist in our body.
That's awesome. You know what? Some of the frequencies that we have employed in the clinic here are pulsed electromagnetic frequency. I would put in a frequency front low-level laser therapy or photobiomodulation. I'm wondering on any sound devices. I've seen research on the binaural beats and that type of frequency. I've seen some studies on the sound healing on, the chord of C or the key of A. What are you finding out in the marketplace, or what with people that you're talking to? I think you wrote about some frequencies in your book as well, with some kind of incredible breakthroughs for folks with neurodegeneration and Parkinson's in particular.
All of what you mentioned are delivery mechanisms for frequency. From my research, they all accomplish something a little bit different. And so my approach in my own personal healing has been, I use them all. It's like, I don't just say, okay, well, we'll select one of these and see if it's going to work or not. For example, if you think about the pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, which is a wonderful therapy, what I use is something called the beamer. Well, what does that do? That actually opens up the circulation throughout the body through frequencies. Yeah. Well, what a marvelous idea. Hello. Yeah. Fact is that as we age, even from the age of 20 to 30, as well as from the age of 60 to 70 or 80, the capillaries begin to narrow. And so we're not getting the oxygen to our extremities. That therapy allows for those tiny little capillaries to open up, for the circulation to then be sent through to the extremities and to the organs of our body, so that we're able to deliver the nutrients to the cells and to remove the waste products from the cell. Now, that doesn't get better than that. So that particular therapy accomplishes something that is critical for long-term healing. People who are having detoxing issues, it may be because they're not getting the circulation to the cells that's blocked up because of aging. And so you just need to open that up. So that's one that does that, I think, very beautifully. That other kind of a photobiomodulation or light therapy that you mentioned, that the research on that is incredible. When I really searched, and I did that just in the last few weeks, well, what are all the studies that have been done on photobiomodulation? Whoa, it's really exciting. A lot of researchers discovering wonderful benefits to that therapy. While there are many, what I see is one of the wonderful benefits is it tends to clear out all the messy gunk in our brains that collect over a period of time. Now, it doesn't get better than that. So anybody who has any degree of what was the name of that person I was supposed to remember that I heard about yesterday, can't remember. So people who are having short-term memory challenges, people who are having some dementia issues, I would say if there's any therapy that they need to consider, it ought to be photobiomodulation, something that used to be called low level laser therapy. The researchers had a big dispute. How low is low? So they changed the name. It's rather awkward. Photobiomodulation. I mean, it's a mouthful, but it really is just light therapy. So when you mention those various therapies, what I've personally done in using them all is to be able to realize, well, I think they all are accomplished something a little bit differently. So combining all of those together, it seems to me, makes a big difference. You mentioned also sound therapy. I've really coupled myself to one of the pioneers of bioacoustics, whose name is Sherry Edwards. I've had her on the radio show a number of times.
Right.
And I think what that therapy does is something a little bit different from light therapy or the PMF therapy. And that, as it turns out, is something that is enabling us to identify those missing frequencies that really the body needs to have in order to be able to come back into balance. So that 8-step hymn production, well, if step number 3 is not working, you can actually activate that through sound therapies. So that covers something that I think the others don't quite get. So I think the combination of all of that, in other words, they're all frequencies, but I think if you think of that as kind of a package, I think they all do something together that really can enable the body to heal.
So in interviewing her and in your research, what are you seeing with the sound therapies? Like share some of that research, some of the research findings.
So what she does is really interesting. She takes voice profiles. So a person will talk for 45 seconds. That profile is recorded. So our voices, even you and I, Greg, as we're talking right now, our voices are conveying the degree of our health. So somebody could actually take a profile of our voice right now and be able to identify what frequencies are missing in our body. So what she has done is she's identified a lot of different conditions in the body that represent the body being out of balance. One of those happens to be Parkinson's, but she's done a lot of other kind of conditions. So she takes the profile that we emit based on this little 45-second analysis, and she runs that through a computer that generates then the frequencies that we have that we need. Great. And she also identifies the frequencies that are missing. And then she actually programs those frequencies into a little device she calls a tone box. And then that is used to be able to then send the frequencies to the person's body through a speaker or through headphones. So in terms of the actual research, from what I can see, the benefit of that is that a lot of the frequencies that she finds are necessary for the body to heal are out of the audible range.
Yeah.
We really don't hear those frequencies. And so the kind of thing that she does, and I think it's really quite wonderful, is she recommends that if you're going to receive the frequencies through a speaker, you have to purchase a special speaker that enables the emission of these very, very low frequencies so that we can then receive what we need to be able to heal. So it almost sounds like a refrigerator humming. So from what I can see, you don't see a plethora of research studies specifically done on the work that she's done. She has a lot of people who've used it and who are very enthusiastic about, being able to recover. In terms of actual research studies, I don't see a lot of that. But from what I can see, I think the potential of that work is really quite amazing.
That sounds really fascinating. I've come across Ness Health. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They do a very similar type of voice recording. And then I was just contacted by a Russian fellow Dr. Fedotov, who also is doing something. So this does sound like this infoceutical of like programming either into water or sound, the frequency into those things to ingest. And I do think, I'm needing the science to catch up a little bit there. I'm all for folks using frequencies. I will send out for sound healing. There's a company called Spiropathics out of Salt Lake City that I'm familiar with that does a program, frequency sound like that. So I think it is super fascinating. I mean, one of the things that we have in the clinic here, the co-founder of the clinic, had discovered Edmund Royal Rife, and the Rife frequencies. And so that was a big part and has continued to be a big part of the practice. We're doing research here at Nature Cures, with the frequencies, because that's kind of what you can't say you're treating the body, right? So we are just offering it as an adjunct service, for collecting data. And we get really amazing results for those that don't know what the Rife machine is. So we're going to talk about all of these different kind of devices, etc. Edmund Royal Rife was driven out of the country around in the 30s. He was curing cancer, all kinds of cures. He was driven out of the country down to Mexico. His laboratory was burned in Mexico, but thankfully some of the technology has made it to current times. And he discovered different frequencies will put the body back into health and get rid of bugs and infections and disease. So it is, and then a lot of other kind of scientists have gone off of that premise of like these frequencies, just like we're talking about here. So that's super fascinating. I'll have to listen in on your interviews with Sherry, and check that out, because I am thinking, as part of this future of medicine discussion and it's always been kind of crossing my brain of like, how do we get the information out to as many people as possible? I've been a brick and mortar guy for 21 years here, of like downtown Portland, Oregon. Here I sit in these walls and people have to come to me. So one of the blessings of the last year has been, okay, let me think literally outside of the box. How do I reach people where they are when they stop traveling or stuck at home? And we are getting very creative. So I'm always fascinated at what's working, right? I like to say I'm a clinician's clinician. I want to use stuff that works. Of course, if we have research, that's great. And some of the innovations, you don't have the research until you have the innovation. So, I'm open to that, as long as we're, doing no harm first. That's like the basic tenet there. So on frequencies, where else? What else are other devices that you've seen or heard about? What else are you impressed with out there?
There's a new device that was invented by Germans, and it is just now being introduced into the United States. The word that they're using that identifies this device is the Healy, Healy. And it's a little device that I purchased myself about 6 months ago and began using it. They had some special discount offerings that I took advantage of. So now I'm actually certified to the top level of this. They have a little device. I'll just show you because I use this every day. It looks like this. And
I have one of those as well.
Do you?
I do.
Okay, so yeah. Well, I don't. So exactly.
But please share it with our listeners and viewers. Yeah.
Well, it's really a fascinating technology in the sense that you use your smartphone and you connect in, and then what it does is it says, all right, so what program would you like us to do an assessment for? And I'll say, well, I've got some little spots on my skin. I've got some rashes on my skin. So I'd like for you to take a look at my skin. They have, oh my heavens, how many programs? 30 yeah. About. Yeah. We'll do a skin program. So we connect that. I take my finger and I'll put it on my smartphone. And then in essence, it tracks the frequencies that I'm emitting. It then gives me an analysis of the frequencies that I need to receive in order to be able to heal my skin. I then, this is going to sound like, how could this really work? I then take my little device, I hold it in my hand, and I punch the smartphone to say start, and the frequencies are emitted over a period of about a minute or 2 minutes, or I can actually have a longer healing if I want. I can go back in, and they have a number of marvelous programs, some of them that were developed by medical doctors in their clinics, just like you, Greg. And so they essentially have programs that can address issues of detoxing and bacteria, chakras. They have a whole set of essential oils. They have Bach flower essences. They have all sorts of wonderful programs that you can access. So it's all about frequencies. And what's amazing about this device that, again, is really brand new, I'm just experiencing it myself, is it allows you to be able to, first of all, have a quick assessment of what are the frequencies that you are now resonating at, so to speak. Yeah. And then it'll do an analysis of, well, what do you need in terms of frequencies if you want to have a successful detoxing program? And then, best of all, it feeds back to you those frequencies as you hold on to this device. And so I've been impressed. What I see is it's not the kind of thing that gives you a quick result. So it's not as if, okay, I'm really feeling like I have a lot of toxins in my body, so I'll do one treatment and I'll see if I can get a result. No, it doesn't work like that. You got to stick with it every day. It takes some time. I think I really began noticing improvement after about 6 weeks. And so I think people have to realize if you're going to pursue this way of healing the body from the inside out, you really have to stick with the program, do it every day, and realize that what's happening is you're just naturally feeding into the body the frequencies the body needs to come back into balance.
Interesting. I mean, that makes sense on the repetition component, right? Because it's not like ill health just happened overnight. It's a cumulative component. It's a way that I talk about acupuncture and other therapeutics is that we have to keep resetting back to this is where the thriving is of our essence. And if you haven't done any of the groundwork, it's harder to get that needle to move for yourself.
And so many people get so frustrated too. They get so frustrated because they're feeling really poorly. They want symptom relief. You know, they like to be able to take the aspirin and have the headache go away. And I really have felt that same way many times myself. So if they start therapies that are building up the body's ability to heal itself, it's going to take some time. People get frustrated and then they sort of abandon, they give up doing the frequency every day because it does take time. You have to commit to it. And I think that what I've seen in my audience is people get frustrated because they feel like, well, I've tried this for 2 weeks and it's not working. So I want to say, well, you've just begun. You're on a journey. Stick with it. Yeah. So if your goal is to create a way to send oxygen to your cells, that's going to take some time. If you're missing some critical frequencies, your body is going to need some time to be able to learn how to manufacture those frequencies on its own. You don't always have to get it externally. So it just takes time for the body to heal in a natural way.
Do you have any other interesting components that you've seen here coming out on the market or what you've heard from some of your clients, consults, etc.?
Well, of course, there are a number of delivery mechanisms for frequencies. There is one, it's called biontology. It's a light therapy. And the inventor of that was in the United States for several years, about 5 or 6 years ago, and spent a couple of years here. There are biontology practitioners in the United States as well as quite a few in Europe. This is a marvelous therapy, actually, in the sense that what this does is it takes in the light that we are emitting, and they're called photons. In other words, the idea is light has all these hundreds of thousands of photon information units. And so what this does is it takes what we're emitting from our own body, and then it reorganizes that and sends back to us the antidotes that allow us to come back into balance. So if we have for example, a bacterial infection of strep, which I had, what the system does is it will move in, recognize, oh, that's the strep. That has a certain frequency profile. What this equipment, this called Sharin, does is it then reverses what that frequency is. So if there's got a little up thing, it does a down, an up thing, down. Of course, that's a very complicated system. And then it sends back to you the antidote of that. Okay.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's really a cool kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that's another way of using frequencies. In this case, they're using light to be able to not just send light to you, but rather to be able to pick up what light you are emitting, to see what the aberrations there are, and then to send back some remedies. And it's interesting when the light is right. In other words, let's say we're asking about, is our heart functioning correctly? Well, the meridian to the heart will have a straight line. It won't have any jiggly lines. But when there's some issues there with that, it won't be a straight line. And you can actually do an analysis to find out, well, what kind of remedies will be able to address that? Oftentimes it might be, for example, a strep infection. And so this creates an antidote. And of course, the obvious issue is, well, if you're talking about viruses, this kind of technology can also do the same thing. It creates these antidotes for these viruses.
Huh. Interesting. Wow. It's so fascinating where, we are living at an amazing time where the technology and then the science is catching up to some of these therapies. So it's really an exciting time for sure.
It is. And, the Star Trek series,
yeah.
It's interesting. If you saw, well, how did they practice medicine then? Did they do blood tests? Or no. They had a little device and they would hold it over the person's body.
Right. Yeah.
They would look at it and say, okay, well, we'll be able to bring this back into balance in about 24 hours. And then they would, send some kind of frequencies back in. Now, that was all fantasy. That was science fiction. But I think that's really a precursor of where we're headed.
Those, what was that? The tricorder, right?
Yes, right.
Yes, the tricorder. Right. I'm a self-professed next generation. I like Jean-Luc Picard was my favorite captain.
Me too.
There you go. Yes, John Patrick Stewart, really great. All right. Well, so on anything else on the frequency component?
I think there is another iteration when it comes to frequencies. So we've talked about there are a lot of delivery mechanisms, and combining those makes a big difference. What's going to happen in the future has not quite materialized, but what will happen is that researchers will begin to use these smart machines or these neural network programming systems. And so what's going to happen is we know, for example, when you're dealing with people with Parkinson's, that sending to a person who has mobility challenges the frequency equivalent to the Schumann frequency will allow that person to better ground. So one of the reasons a person with Parkinson's has difficulty with mobility is all of their energy is up here at the head. It's not down at their feet. So in terms of balance, the balance is kind of like that. Their feet are down here, their head, the energy is up here at the head. And so they have difficulty, they're falling, and they're having difficulty with their mobility. So we know, we don't have to do research, we know that if you send to a person that has these kind of balance issues or mobility challenges, the Schumann frequency, they'll come back into a place of being able to be more centered. Okay, we know that. But there's got to be a lot more to that. And so I think what's going to happen is you'll begin to realize, okay, if we take a set of subjects of people who have these mobility challenges, let's send to them not only the Schumann frequencies, but we'll send to them some other combinations of frequencies. Okay, let's observe what happens to them. Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? And then these neural net programs will automatically be able to reorganize the frequencies that are transmitted, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of frequencies. Observe it again. Some of them got better, some of them didn't. Change it. And so it's exactly what's happening to program smart cars. It's the same process, except we're talking about human beings. So I think using those kind of programs will be able to really make enormous and very fast advances. So anybody out there who is thinking, oh my gosh, there's no hope for me, I don't see any possibilities, I think even in the next several years, the future portends really wonderful revelations for people who are looking for ways to get relief from their symptoms using approaches that are not the standard approaches.
So let's talk about that, because that's a new concept, I think, for a lot of folks listening, is the neural net, and the kind of the neural learning. So you're saying it's going to be used for diagnosis and for treatment. Um, so it's basically it's a device that gives feedback in. Are you talking about artificial intelligence to kind of crunch the numbers and look for patterns and then come back with a response to what comes into the data set, so to speak?
Right. I think the best way to explain it is to think about what happens in the programming of smart cars. So, of course, they're getting more sophisticated now, but the way that works is the program for a smart car has all the information that it needs to send the car down the road. There's a white strip down in the middle, and then there's a stop sign. Okay, if the program doesn't recognize what the meaning of the stop sign is, you have to stop and you have to tell the program, okay, that's a stop sign. You've got to stop your car. So when we think about programming for health, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we know the basic frequencies that a person needs to be able to heal. And so we send those frequencies in, and yet all of a sudden the person has a stop sign, which means all of a sudden they have a terrible tremor. Okay, we've got to feed back in to the neural programming system. Wait a minute. These aren't all the frequencies the person needs. This person has a tremor. So let's go back in and let's reorganize the frequencies that are sent and see if it helps or not. Reorganized frequencies are sent, doesn't help. Reorganized frequencies, in other words, you go back and forth, and finally the person is better. They have no tremor. So it's a way of really very quickly being able to reorganize the frequencies that are transmitted to see if they help or not. And of course, we have to have medical professionals such as yourself who are able to work with patients and to see, all right, is this going to work or is this not going to work? So it works for one patient. Will it work for two? Will it work for three? Sure. So you begin to expand it out to a lot of people. And then finally, you've got a whole system where the human body is traveling down. We're walking, we're driving, we're living. We run into a problem. And so we alert these neural program networks. There's a problem here. Look at it. Let's find out what kind of frequencies the person's needs. So it's really all about receiving the frequencies that are being emitted and then learning what frequencies need to be transmitted. So it's a pretty complicated thing that researchers are going to have a problem doing on their own independently without that help, because there are just so many frequencies.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how do you figure out which ones there are? I think these kind of machine learning programs can really help a great deal. I know I was going to just mention something that people might be interested in. If you think about, well, how do you learn what really works? If we go back to rural life, then people want to know, well, how in the world did he do what he did? It was really pretty remarkable. We just had a microscope, a very sophisticated microscope that nobody else had. He could see bacteria. So all he did randomly was he would send different frequencies in, look in the microscope and see, okay, here's a cancer cell. Is this going to do something to the cancer cell or not? So he could see whether it worked or not. It's really kind of the same idea, where in this case, though, what we're talking about is having these very sophisticated machine learning systems that enable us to be able to do this much more quickly.
It seems like on that component, it's like you need so many people to participate in it, to kind of feed the information in and then have the computing data set up to receive it.
That's right.
That is so exciting. I'm full on board with that. Actually, that's a component of a network of clinics that I'm actually in development of doing, is having that capability. But you have to be able to collect the data in a usable form and fashion and have the forethought of putting it in correctly, right?
Well, that's correct. And that's exactly right. So you do have to be able to have that ability to track and to input the data that the system needs to be able to do what it needs to do.
To make an informed kind of feedback loop. Yeah.
That's right. It's right. That's really critical.
Do you know anyone that's currently doing that or where that's coming out of now?
I don't, and I've been pursuing that in other systems. I know that machine learning is being used to, for example, predict the future of stocks and the future of cryptocurrencies. So I've actually emailed some people who do that. I mean, they use smart neural network machine learning programs to predict which cryptocurrencies are going to succeed, which stocks are going to succeed. And I asked them, so do you think there's any chance we could piggyback on what you do and use, adopt your technology to the problem of human symptoms? They came back and said, oh, that's out of our league. We're going to stick with cryptocurrencies.
We're going to stay on making millions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I thought, I'm sure that there are ways to couple with systems that are currently in place that are doing that, to somehow couple it to what we need to do. But I have not found any source yet.
All right. Well, keep looking. I'll keep looking.
Good. We'll find something, I'm sure.
Yeah. Love it. So on that, there's another big component that we wanted to talk about today on, this idea of thought forms are a huge reason why some people recover and others don't. What are you seeing with that?
It's where everything is at, really. It's at the bottom line of whether or not a person recovers or not. And of course, we're in a way talking about a different subject, but thoughts have frequencies. So if I say to myself, oh, I went to the doctor told me I have Parkinson's disease. Oh no, I've got to tell my husband, I've got to tell my wife, I'd better call some nursing homes. Those thoughts have very low frequencies. We're talking, if you want to get sick, you keep thinking that way. And so it's very clear that thoughts are what we will manifest. Mm-hmm. And of course, when I talk to people, and there have been so many that I've talked with who just call and they want to somehow just connect and say hello.
Yeah.
But they'll ask me the question, so, Robert, have you ever seen anybody who's ever gotten better from this? Okay, that's their question.
Right.
And of course, wait a minute, I've spent 20 years documenting people who are getting better. We've got interviews of 80 people on the radio show, people who tell their stories. It's like, all right, so what I'll do, though, instead of explaining, look, yes, the answer is we do have evidence. We do have reports of many people who succeeded in being able to find relief from their symptoms. I don't say that. What I say is, sounds to me like a big part of you is thinking it's not possible. Is that right? Mm-hmm. They'll always say, yeah, that's right. My doctor told me, my friends tell me I'm going to get worse and worse. Okay. Well, then I give them the bad news, and I sometimes cringe and think, should I really say this? I'll say, okay, well, you'll be sure and manifest what you believe, and that's what you believe. So I'm sorry, but you can do all the therapies you might want to do. Maybe you're a millionaire. Maybe you can spend millions of dollars on therapies. Guess what? It's not going to happen if, in fact, in your heart, mind, and soul, you hold the belief that it's not going to be possible. And of course, the reverse is also true. If we say to ourselves, my body is in the process of healing now, that frequency is higher. I'm sorry, but we're now resonating at a frequency that's the healing frequency. If we hold that and believe in our heart, mind, and soul that, in fact, that's what's going to happen, that's what we're going to manifest. So people manifest what they think. And the reason for that is that every thought has a frequency. So we're just really resonating at frequencies. And if of the 60,000 or so thoughts we have every day, if 40,000 or maybe only 30,000, and it's 50% of those thoughts are negative, they're thoughts that are not in our best and highest good. The thoughts that say, oh, the future is going to be terrible. The world's never going to be able to come together, and we're never going to have peace. And I'm never going to get along with my husband or my wife or my child. Or, if you begin to carry those thoughts over and over, I'll never solve this. I'll never solve this. You will never solve that. You're going to manifest what you think, period. And of course, the difficulty that I think people have is even people who recognize that, I'll say to them, so that's what you believe. Well, part of you, I bet, thinks that really it's not true. And they'll say, yeah, I know that's right, but I can't stop thinking that I'm getting worse because I wake up in the morning and I have a new symptom and I think, oh, there it is. I'm deteriorating. And so I just can't get out of the trap of thinking. And that's really why I've moved to this whole idea of the future of medicine, because I think if we can then begin to transmit these frequencies to people through these various systems, that people's attitudes, their thoughts will transform. They will be vibrating, so to speak, at these higher frequencies that are conducive to healing.
Mm, lovely. So now let's be clear though, you are not saying that people are creating their illness.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No. It's just that the frequencies that they need to resonate at to heal are not present. That's all it is.
The old adage comes to mind of your energy flows to where attention goes, right? Of like looking at what you want to become. I think we see some of this in Joe Dispenza's work as well, of looking at our future selves in full health and abundance and prosperity and vibrancy. Even though you might be, disabled on the chair, right? If you just think like this is it, your mind is a powerful goal achieving machine and you will put your past into your future and it will prove like, yeah, this is reality for me. Now, what do you do for the folks that actually do have their headset and mind in the right spot? They're doing kind of all of the quote unquote right things and they're just not making progress. How do you coach them or counsel them in that process?
Oh, that's such a good question and such a tough question to answer. My approach has been to think of it as a process, a day in and day out process, and to provide whatever support we can provide to persons to be able to help them realize today was not a good day for various reasons, and yet realize that your body is just healing. So I'm continually telling people that if you embrace a therapy that your doctor has recommended that's going to help you, you may feel worse. You may get worse. And just realize you can have two thoughts. One of those thoughts is, oh, I'm worse. I'm deteriorating. This therapy is not working. My doctor doesn't know what he's doing. Or you can say, my body is in the process of healing. Hooray! Finally, I know in my own personal experience, I have a thought that when I get a therapy, I almost expect that I'm going to feel worse because my body is healing. I've got to have some more rest. I've got to have more sleep. I've got to have better nutrition. And it means that my body's going to struggle to be able to come back into balance. And so if the therapy is really working, it's not like an aspirin where I'm feeling better. So one of the kinds of things I try to do with folks who get so discouraged, and for good reason, is to say, okay, so wait a minute. Now you've made some good choices on the diet that you've got and the exercise that you're doing. You've got a wonderful medical team that you're working with. You can't do better than any of that. And yet you're feeling like you're not getting better. Your body needs a little time to come back into balance. Be a little patient with your body. And of course, here we're really talking about persons with these neurological challenges. Well, okay, so what's really at the root of that? Well, there's a lot of intensity there. There's a lot of let's make it happen.
Yeah.
If we look at people who have these neurological challenges and we were to look at all the various occupations and the work that they do, we're talking about the movers and the shakers of the world. Mm-hmm. The people who have these symptoms are successful people. I mean, they go out, they do it. And so they have this incredible drive to make it happen. And so when it comes to the challenge of being able to have a balance of that sympathetic system and the parasympathetic nervous system, people that have that inner drive that makes them so successful have a great difficulty of being able to come back into balance. And so they're not really there out driving and driving and driving. So one of the problems is that intensity is just so great. If they decide, okay, I'm going to get some therapies that are going to fix this, they try the therapies, and that same drive means that they want it fixed now. They do not want to wait. And so the difficulty is that they've got to be able to learn, okay, wait a minute. I've got to have some patience here. My body is my best friend. let me allow my body to do what it needs to come back into balance, which means that instead of working 80 hours a day, as some of these people do, is to realize I've got to reduce that. I've got to spend some more time with my family, have some relaxation time, chill out, have a good time, so that they can have a better balance in their life. So one of the ways that I try to point this out is, look, and depending on who the person is, I can always point out, look, you've been very successful in your life, right? And they'll always say, well, yeah, that's true. All right, so that's a wonderful skill. That's a wonderful ability. Not all people have that. In fact, very few people do, but you happen to possess that. All right, now the difficulty is that intensity, that drive is your undoing because your body cannot sustain that level of intensity 24 hours a day. It just can't do it. Now, maybe when you were 20, it would work. But as you get age on, the body is not able to sustain that. Nobody can. So the idea is to explain to people, okay, what you can do for yourself is to acknowledge and give yourself some praise for what that intensity has done for you. It's been a great gift, but also to realize it's time to make a shift. And that shift is to be able to bring back yourself into a place of enjoying life and a place of calm and intensity.
Yeah.
And I think that helps a lot of people as well.
Lovely. Lovely. That's really sage advice for sure. That is, I find, one of the harder challenges. Most folks come in and say, I want results 3 years ago. Right. And it's hard as a provider practitioner to say, well, we have to be patient with this process. And because I'm impatient too, I want to get results for folks. So, that's why I'm always, out refining the program protocol, looking for the next thing to add in for folks to really expedite the change for them. But there is something to be said about the body will, it will unfold at whatever rate it's going to. And, some kind of case studies here, I've had folks where it took 8 months after our, what I call Camp Nature Cures for, they get this all of a sudden light bulb moment and things are gone. But 8 months. So that was a long time of having some hope, kind of digging deep, doing the work. And other folks in the first 3 months are showing really profound changes. There's a new technique that I've been putting in. It's a laser activated and guided human small cell human embryonic like stem cell procedure, which is super. I'm so excited to talk about it with you when I come on your show and share that with
please do.
With your group. They're showing, significant results in 30 minutes to an hour. It's almost, it looks like a miracle happens, and I'll take it that. I would think we should be able to expect miracles every day. It's not too much to ask. We can ask for them. And I think we're going to have some research coming out of the group that I partnered up with that shows that we can actually we can get it in a design protocol to occur more and more frequently for folks. So this is so exciting on that front. But, it's like, oh, wow, half an hour to an hour versus 8 months. We can't make the claim on either side of the coin, And so that I totally feel folks' frustrations and, upsetness and expectations don't get met that way. And, I think that's a piece of the healing puzzle as well. Having those conversations with folks around, well, what is the expectation? There aren't any guarantees with any procedure. We want to do no harm first. Let's do the safe procedures, but effective procedures at the beginning. And then on the continuum of care, I actually include the surgery on there because people do get benefit from that deep brain stimulation. But I just don't think it should be their first mode to go to right after or even before medications fail or never work for them. So there is a lot of options. And that's one of the reasons why I created this podcast platform called What the Health here, why I've got you coming on here to share, what you're seeing, because you've been at this specifically with Parkinson's patients since 2004. How did you pick this condition? Do you have some special affinity to it or fascination? How did you get into specifically focusing in on Parkinson's?
I have a story about why. My mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She had quite a few symptoms. And what happened to her was she began to have depression. She had anxiety. She had back injury. She had some surgery for that. And my mother wound up taking, I think, as many as 12, maybe 14 prescription medicines. They were prescribed by many different medical professionals, not just people who were neurologists, but people who were family doctors, etc. And of course, at the time, she would go to the physician, and the physician wouldn't check to see, well, what other medicines are you taking? It was their specialty to prescribe whatever they prescribed. Now, the reason that she died was that she had a coma, and the coma resulted, as best I can determine, from the combination of these 12 or 14 medications. So the research is done on a single medication, but when you combine a second, there's no research on what happens when you combine medicine A with medicine B. And of course, when you've got 12 or 14 medicines, those kind of interactions, and given that she has her own body, meant that she really could not tolerate taking all those medicines. And so it was a very sad ending for my mother. She was in a coma for 2 months. And so I began to think, well, medicines are great, and certainly they help some people, but it seems to me there have got to be some other options that she could have considered. Now, the other part of my story is that I did begin to focus my research on Parkinson's and what kind of reasons do people have those symptoms? What are the causes? Number one. And number two, what kind of therapies can they pursue? And so that obviously I figured was the most challenging research program that I can embrace. I mean, at the time, especially back in 2004, no one really had a clue about what was really involved with what was causing these symptoms. So she was an inspiration for me to ask the question, well, what other options might be available? Now, the second inspiration for me to continue with this was about 5 years later. My uncle, Gordon, also was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He took the prescription medicines for 15 years, and Gordon ultimately, sadly, died of pneumonia. And Gordon donated his body to the Harvard Medical School. He felt like if he could do anything for the Parkinson's community, maybe the medical professionals can learn something from an autopsy of his body. So the body went to the Harvard Medical School. I didn't hear anything from my aunt. And then finally, a year later, I called her and I said, well, could you tell me what happened to the autopsy? You know, this is my specialty. I need to know what the result was. She said, oh, they sent the body back. I'm sorry I didn't call you. They sent it back after a few months. They said they could not use his body. I thought, well, why not? She said, oh, they determined he didn't have Parkinson's. He had hepatitis C.
Wow.
And I thought, whoa, you've got to be kidding me. So he was diagnosed. He took these medications for all of these years. And interestingly enough, even in the last year, there was a study indicating that hepatitis C, in fact, was implicated in diagnoses of Parkinson's disease.
Interesting.
I thought, whoa, that's really incredible. So I really realized, okay, I think this really is a label for what we could consider to be what's called a garbage can diagnosis. So it really is not a definitive diagnosis. After all, when somebody comes into the neurologist uses their best skill and ability to give a label to that person, but there's no definitive test really to say, well, we know exactly what this is. And so the more I looked at this, the more I realized, whoa, the factors that cause these symptoms are truly multifaceted.
Yeah.
And the other kind of revelation that I found in actually the early years of my study was trauma winds up being at the foundation of everything. And of course, one of the other reasons why people have difficulty healing is they continue to run away from the traumas that they've experienced in their life. Instead of asking the question, okay, I'm tired of carrying this stuck energy around my body. I want to release it. I want to let it go. Well, and so instead of embracing those therapies, they tend to want to run away from it until they are able to say, okay, I've had trauma in my life. Let me just confront it, address it, and release it so that I no longer carry that trauma. Then I'm going to get well. And of course, to make a point we made earlier, that trauma resonates at a very low frequencies, and so you're going to continue to get ill.
I was going to say, way to really bring this back around, Robert, to frequencies. So That's a marvelous place to wind up our awesome discussion this afternoon. Any last parting words in the last minute of the show here?
My parting words to everyone who is connected in with Dr. Eckel's program is the following. You're here because you're wondering if there's any possibility of being able to get well. And the answer is unequivocally yes. The answer is yes. The body knows how to heal itself. The natural state for the body is a state of balance and healing. The unnatural state is the state of illness. So realize that there is one thing you can do for yourself, and that is quite simply said, trust your body's ability to heal. It's a miracle. The body's a miracle. The body knows how to come back into balance. And so if you can then begin to realize, all right, I've got to support the basic functions of my body. I've got to make sure I'm hydrated. I've got to make sure I've got enough oxygen. I've got to have ways of being able to eliminate the toxins that I am exposed to. And I've got to realize that in my heart, mind, and soul, I know that if I'm experiencing symptoms now, that there are solutions out there. There are medical professionals like Dr. Eckel who are there and available for me. So reach out, and I think you'll be amazed at the dozens and dozens of options that are available for you to be able to find relief from your symptoms. Some of them, of course, are traditional medical, but many of them are natural. They are not intrusive. Yes, they are new developments. Yes, they are new inventions. Do we have a lot of research on some of them? No. But I want to say I am very enthused about the future. The future of medicine is now. It is here. So embrace that and pursue whatever therapies you are called out to do. There's only one mistake you can make, and that's to do nothing.
I love it. Thank you so much, Robert. This is What the Health, folks. If you like today's show, please share it with your loved ones, your family members, your community. That's how change happens. This is the future of medicine, and we're trying to bring it right to you in your living room. We are here on the Contact Talk radios Tuesdays from 2 to 3 Pacific Standard Time. See you next week. Thanks for coming.